1 million users, 5 days. Not 5 months, not 5 weeks, 5 days. When ChatGPT launched on November 30th, 2022, it broke every record for consumer technology adoption in history. Netflix took 3.5 years to reach 1 million users. Instagram took 2.5 months. ChatGPT did it before the first week was over. But here's the question that nobody has fully answered. How? How does a research lab founded by a small group of idealists with a nonprofit charter build something so powerful that it rewires the entire technology industry in under a decade? The answer involves a billion-dollar bet, a secret model that was too dangerous to release, a fundamental betrayal of the organization's own founding principles, and one decision made in a San Francisco boardroom that nearly burned the whole thing down. This is the real story of ChatGPT. December 11th, 2015, San Francisco, California. A group of 11 people signed their names to a document committing $1 billion to a single idea: that artificial general intelligence was coming, that nobody could stop it, and that the only responsible move was to make sure the people building it actually cared about humanity. That organization was OpenAI. The names on that founding document read like a Silicon Valley Hall of Fame: Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, and a 30-year-old former Y Combinator president named Sam Altman, who would eventually become the face of everything that followed. The stated mission was almost disarmingly simple: develop AI that benefits all of humanity. No shareholders to answer to, no profit motive, just the work. Greg Brockman, the co-founder who would become CTO, had walked away from a senior role at Stripe to join. Ilya Sutskever, one of the world's most respected deep learning researchers, left Google Brain, a position most AI scientists would consider the pinnacle of the field, to become OpenAI's chief scientist. These were not people who needed the money. They were people who genuinely believed they were working on the most consequential technology in human history. And for the first few years, the work was quiet, methodical, serious. In 2018, OpenAI released GPT-1, a language model that could generate coherent text by predicting the next word in a sequence. It was impressive inside research circles. The general public barely noticed. Then came GPT-2 in 2019. And that's where the story gets complicated. GPT-2 was so capable, so unnervingly good at generating realistic, persuasive text, that OpenAI made a decision almost unheard of in academic research. They finished it, and then they refused to release it. They called it too dangerous. They cited risks of mass disinformation, fake news at industrial scale, automated propaganda. The AI research community erupted. Critics called it a publicity stunt. Supporters called it the first genuinely responsible act in the history of the field. Ilya Sutskever, the man who had preached open research from day one, found himself defending a closed-door policy he wasn't entirely comfortable with. The tension inside OpenAI was real, and it was only going to get worse. Because in that same year, 2019, a phone call came in from Redmond, Washington, and the people on the other end of that call were about to change everything. Microsoft had a problem. Google owned search, Amazon owned cloud commerce, and Microsoft, despite being one of the largest companies on Earth, was watching the AI revolution accelerate without a horse in the race that actually mattered. So they made a move. In July 2019, Microsoft invested $1 billion into OpenAI, a nonprofit research lab that had, until that moment, operated on donations and idealism. The deal was structured carefully. OpenAI created a new capped profit subsidiary, meaning investors could earn returns, but only up to 100 times their investment. After that cap, all profits would revert to the nonprofit mission. Sam Altman was the architect of that structure. It was a tightrope, enough commercial incentive to attract serious capital enough nonprofit framing to preserve the founding mission. Whether it actually preserved anything is a question we'll come back to. Remember the open loop from the beginning. The question of how ChatGPT achieved what no technology product had ever achieved? We're starting to get there, but the answer isn't just technical, it's strategic. And it starts here, with this deal. With Microsoft's $1 billion and access to Azure's supercomputing infrastructure, OpenAI could finally train models at a scale that had previously been impossible. The compute costs alone for the models that followed ran into the tens of millions of dollars per training run. GPT-3 launched in 2020, 175 billion parameters, text so fluid, so contextually aware, that developers who got early API access described the experience as genuinely disorienting. One programmer wrote that using GPT-3 felt like discovering a new law of physics. But GPT-3 was still an API, a tool for developers. The general public still couldn't touch it. Stop. Before we go further, you need to understand something. The gap between a powerful AI model and a product that 1 billion people will actually use is not a technical gap. It's a design gap. It's a trust gap. It's the difference between a laboratory instrument and a household appliance. The team at OpenAI knew this. And so they spent the better part of 2 years working on something that wasn't just smarter. It was safer, more honest about its limitations, trained not just on raw text prediction, but on human feedback. Actual humans rating responses, flagging bad outputs, teaching the model what a good answer actually looked like. They called the technique reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. And it was the single most important ingredient in what came next. By 2022, OpenAI had spent an estimated $100 million developing the system that would become ChatGPT. The compute costs, the human labelers, the safety research, the infrastructure, $100 million to build a chat interface. And on November 30th, 2022, a Wednesday, they released it to the public for free. What happened next, nobody inside OpenAI fully predicted. Not at that scale. Not that fast. The servers buckled, the wait lists filled. Tech journalists who'd covered the industry for decades were writing that this felt different. Not incrementally different, categorically different. 1 million users in 5 days. 40 million by the end of January 2023. 100 million by February. Making it the fastest growing consumer application in the history of the internet. Google, the company that had essentially invented the modern era of AI research, went to internal code red. They fast-tracked the release of their own AI products. The entire technology industry pivoted, not gradually, but overnight. ChatGPT had detonated something, and the people who built it were about to discover that detonations are very hard to control. By early 2023, OpenAI was valued at $29 billion. $29 billion. For a company that had started as a nonprofit 7 years earlier with a mission statement about benefiting humanity. Microsoft deepened its investment, eventually committing a reported $10 billion across multiple tranches. ChatGPT was integrated into Bing, into Microsoft Office, into Azure's enterprise cloud. The partnership that had started as a $1 billion lifeline had become something far more entangled. And here's where the story gets genuinely strange. At 6 minutes in, it's worth returning to the original question. Not just how ChatGPT achieved this, but what the achievement actually cost. Because the answer is more complicated than the growth charts suggest. The founding promise of OpenAI was openness. The name was not accidental. The original charter committed to publishing research, sharing models, and treating safety as a collective responsibility rather than a competitive advantage. GPT-4, released in March 2023, came with almost no technical disclosure, no paper describing the architecture, no details about training data, no model size. OpenAI's explanation was measured and careful. Safety concerns, competitive pressures, responsible deployment. The AI research community, including some of OpenAI's own former researchers, called it something else entirely. They called it a closed-source commercial product wrapped in safety language. Ilya Sutskever, the chief scientist who had once advocated for open research, had watched the organization he helped build transform into something he hadn't signed up for. The internal tensions that had been simmering since the GPT-2 decision had never fully resolved. Then, in November 2023, they exploded. On a Friday afternoon, November 17, 2023, OpenAI's board of directors fired Sam Altman without warning, without a public successor. The stated reason was vague. He had not been consistently candid with the board. The technology world stopped. Within 48 hours, nearly 700 of OpenAI's 770 employees signed an open letter threatening to resign and follow Altman to Microsoft if the board didn't reverse course. The board, which had been designed specifically to prioritize mission over profit, had made a decision that the company's own staff overwhelmingly rejected. 5 days later, 5 days the same number it had taken ChatGPT to reach 1 million users, Sam Altman was reinstated as CEO. The board members who had voted to fire him were gone, and Ilya Sutskever, who had reportedly voted with the board to remove Altman, issued a public statement saying he regretted his role in the decision. Stop and sit with that for a moment. The co-founder and chief scientist of OpenAI, the man who had left Google Brain to build something he believed in, publicly stated that he regretted the most significant governance decision the organization had ever made. 9 months later, in May 2024, Sutskever left OpenAI entirely. The organization founded to keep AI safe and open had become, in the span of 9 years, a $29 billion commercial enterprise embroiled in internal power struggles, governance crises, and fundamental contradictions between its stated mission and its actual behavior. That is the answer to the question from the opening. That is the secret behind ChatGPT's development. It wasn't just technical brilliance. It wasn't just the RLHF training or the Microsoft infrastructure or the elegant interface design. It was a series of compromises, each one individually defensible, collectively transformative, that turned a nonprofit research lab into the most consequential AI company on Earth. And now that company sits at the center of a global conversation that none of its founders fully anticipated. Here's where we are today. ChatGPT has over 180 million active users. It is used in hospitals to draft clinical notes, in law firms to review contracts, in classrooms, both by students trying to skip the work and by teachers trying to redesign the work entirely, in newsrooms, in customer service centers, in government agencies. The European Union passed the AI Act in 2024, the world's first comprehensive legal framework for artificial intelligence regulation, citing ChatGPT's rapid proliferation as one of the primary catalysts. Schools from New York City to Sydney banned it, then unbanned it, then banned it again, then gave up trying to ban it, and started teaching students how to use it responsibly instead. The question of what ChatGPT has done to human creativity, human labor, and human cognition is one that philosophers, economists, and neuroscientists are actively debating, and nowhere near resolving. But here's the part that stays with me. OpenAI's original charter contains a clause that most people have never read. It states that if the organization ever determines that another entity is on a path to building AGI before us, artificial general intelligence, the kind that surpasses human capability across all domains, OpenAI is permitted to abandon its safety commitments and race to the finish line instead. They built in a permission structure to stop being careful. That clause has never been invoked. but it exists, and the people who wrote it believed they might one day need it. We are living in the earliest days of a technology that its own creators describe as potentially the most transformative and the most dangerous in human history. And the organization most responsible for accelerating its development is a hybrid nonprofit commercial entity that fired and rehired its own CEO in 5 days, lost its chief scientist over a governance crisis, and raised $10 billion from the world's largest software company. None of that makes ChatGPT less remarkable. The thing works. The thing is genuinely extraordinary. The thing has already changed how millions of people think, write, work, and learn. But the story of how it got here is not a clean story of visionary founders and inevitable progress. It's a story about what happens when the stakes get high enough that even the people who care most about getting it right start making decisions they didn't think they'd make. The technology arrived faster than the wisdom to govern it. And that gap between what we've built and what we understand about what we've built is the most important story of our time. If this story surprised you, subscribe. We put out one of these every week, and we don't do shallow. Next week, a single man, a single decision, and a financial system so fragile that one Tuesday morning in 2008, the entire global economy came within 72 hours of total collapse. The name you know, the real story you don't.